Shalom, Israel. This brother Yahweh from the Three Hebrew Boys. I told you a while back that I would read this book and I would go into this Jesus person and explain who he really is, because there's a lot of information in this false Christ. This Caucasian that they use his name is Caesar Borgia, right there. And this drawing is from Leonardo da Vinci. This is how they came together to make this false Christ. And this, in the eyes of the Most High, is called idolatry. I'm going to go into the scriptures and I'm going to go into the Apocrypha. This is the Apocrypha, to show you that that book is part of the Bible, that was part of the Bible. This is a 1611 edition of Bible. And in the beginning of it, it's going to show here, if you can see it, or if you can see it real good, you will see where it says the Old Testament right there. Okay. The Apocrypha is right there. The New Testament is here, to show you that the Apocrypha was part of the Bible before the Jesuits took it out completely, because the Apocrypha points to a certain race of what they would do to society throughout time, even to this day with this fake virus. This guy, this family, the Borgia family, is a very notorious and evil family. All of it's in this book. His father, him, his brother, sister, the evilness that they done. And it's sad that they would use this character, because Rome was so afraid of this guy. He had so much fear that when he died, Leonardo da Vinci made a portrait of him. If I'm not mistaken, his father, Rodrigo Borgia, had him, Leonardo da Vinci, and it was another character to have a drawing. But Leonardo, being his buddy, not buddy as in friendship, had the best portrait, so they used that after he died. So this guy was to be worshipped, and this is who the Catholic Church pushed into society. And when us as Israelites came out of Africa on those slave ships, this is who they forced. They forced this on our people, and we knew nothing of this guy. Now, this was in early 1600s, something like that, early 1600s, mid 1503, Rodrigo died. And then his father died like 6 years later. So when it spread across the land of Europe that this guy was the vicar of Christ, they took the Messiah, the black Messiah, Yeshua, and changed his identity. So for those of you that say it doesn't matter, why would they change the character? And then they would use someone that was so evil and notorious as this man was, Caesar Borgia, having sex with his sister, with anybody that walked the street, sex with men, little boys. It's all in that book. I'm gonna read it off. I went through the first 6 chapters and I highlighted some points because it would take too long to read those 6 chapters. But let me go into some scriptures and show you that when you fix your lips and say Jesus, you're thinking of this white guy. And you need to understand how this is an abomination and idolatry to the Most High, especially you Israelites that's waking up and coming out of this Christianity, realizing that you're Hebrews and not Negroes. You're not African American. Let me get that piece. Let me go into that too, because African American is not a race, and I'm gonna continue to hit on that until it's understood. I'm gonna continue to show this in my videos that there's no such thing as African American. No such thing. You calling yourselves the slaves of these two Edomites. Leo, Scipio, Africanus, Americana, Vespucci. And it says in Psalm 49:11, their inward thoughts is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. And this is what Esau does, the white society. You calling yourself after land. When you say you're French, Italian, American, you calling yourself after land. And when you say, what's your nationality? And they say, I'm Italian, you naming yourself after land, not after your bloodline. And when you say you're African American, we're the only race that's saying we still slaves. See, when we're the Hebrew Israelites of this Bible, the Bible is all about us. It's our history book. From the beginning to the middle, up until the end, which is where we live in now. The Bible is a guide for us, especially for those in the latter days that's waking up, that we're the Israelites of this Bible. We are God's chosen people. Of course, you think, well, all people, all races are God's chosen people. No, it's not. He made all races, but he chose one. Let's see if I can find that. Amos 3:1. Let's see, Amos 3:1. Hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O children of Israel. That's our ancestors. Against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. That's all other nationalities that the Most High made. He made their one to be a favorite. You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. That's why we get punished so harsh as we go through this timeline of life. It seems like all the nations prosper when they come here except us. Can two walk together except they be agreed? See, he made all nations, but he only made one for itself. Just like he made a four-legged beast, but he made one for itself. That's the lamb. He made the fowls of the air. That's a lot of different birds, but he made one his favorite, and that's the dove. And of all the nations, he made one his favorite, and that's the Hebrew Israelites. This is why all nations are so jealous of us and was so jealous of us. They decided to conspire against us and enslave us and then take us down. The reason why the Most High allowed it was because we started going away from the law, statutes, and commandment and started doing things that the heathens were doing. Especially when we got to child sacrifice, and the Most High had enough of us. So he allowed these nations to take us down. That's Psalms 83. Psalms 83. There we go. And I'll read it to you so you won't think I'm making that up. Psalms 83. Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. Hidden ones is those that don't know who they are, their identity, which was the Israelites eventually. We start calling ourselves by Romans, Greek, and all the other lands in that area. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. That's why we don't know who we are. Now, of course, the Caucasian race was aware of this. So there was in the Caucasian race, which is Edom, a part of Edom took advantage of them taking us out of Jerusalem, running us out of Israel. So they make up a nationality called Jewish. They would call themselves Jewish and make up a religion of Judaism. So once we got ran out of the land of hundreds of years later, this was 70 AD. Then in 1948, they concoct a scheme and go to the Council, United Nations, to get that land back when they was never in the land to begin with. It was all Negroes. Today we're called Negroes. Back then we were the Jews in that land. We were the Hebrews. Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. We were the only three left. The other two, the Most High have gotten rid of hundreds of, I think it was hundreds of years before the birth of Christ, when the Most High have got rid of the first 10 nations. The only three that was left. And then Rome ran us out of Israel, and here comes this fake race with this fake religion of Judaism, went to the council, and the other black nations that surrounded Israel was upset when they won it in 1948, having the world think that they were the Jews that was ran off in 70 AD. Those Jews ran into Africa, populated Africa. 1,250 years later, here come Syria and the other Middle East, taking us slavery into the Sahara slave trade, and here come England to bring us to America for the American slave trade. For they have consulted together with one consent; they are confederate against thee. And then it names all the nations that came against us, which Arabs, Chinese, Egyptians, Africans, Japanese, Jewish, Philistines. All these different nations came against it and been against us ever since. So all in the South America, Jamaica, Cuba, all those nations down there, Mexico, all those are Israelite nations. When they brought us over here from Spain and went to all the other little islands, those were Israelite slaves, if you go back far enough in your history. Now, when the Catholic Church started spreading Catholicism, they were spreading this guy here. And that's why in South America, they are mostly Catholic. But this guy, you have to understand, his father was the Pope Alexander VI. So you have to go into this Edomite life and understand who you worshiping to see that it's idolatry. Let's go there. First Corinthians 10 and 20. First Corinthians. First Corinthians 10 and 20. 10 and 20. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God. Now, the sacrifice today is your holidays. The holidays you celebrate according to the Roman Catholic Church. which is your Christmas, your Easter, your Thanksgiving, when you cook your food, that's considered today a sacrifice. And you cooking it, you say your prayer to God. So when we as Israelites, especially the Christians that don't know their identity, and you doing this to Jesus, this is why this is idolatry to the Most High God. You're not really doing it to the God that brought us out of Egypt. You're doing it to Edom's God and not ours, the God that separated us from the other nations. They sacrifice to devils and not to God, and I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. That's why we have so much happening to us as a race of people, or young black men, and why we get beat down, shot down, on and on, all throughout time, because you're actually praying to a false God. Let's go into the Apocrypha. And I want to get started on the time, how this was prophesied first, and then I go into the book and show you how it came about. But that which is made with hands is cursed, as well it as he that made it. He, because he made it, and it, because being corruptible, it was called God. And this guy was corruptible. He was terrible. But they made this guy, who you call Jesus, into a god. For the ungodly and his ungodliness are both alike hateful unto God. That book is going to explain everything they did. So you will know when you fix your lips and say, oh, Jesus, thank you, Jesus, you calling on the wrong God. It's, and if you say, well, it doesn't matter. If you got children, 2 or 3 children, male or female, it doesn't matter. Have them stand in front of you and have them turn their back against you. And then tell them, don't turn around until you call their name. Call out every name you know and see if they turn around. And then when you call them by their correct name, you will see that they'll turn around and say, yes, mother or father. Name does make a difference when you calling on the right God, even when it comes to God. It makes a huge difference. There is no one God. There are many gods, and you have to know which one you're worshiping. Our God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yes, they had Abraham and Isaac, them had many children, but only one had the promise, and that's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just like all the other nations. That's why the other nations hate us, because a lot of nations came out of Abraham. He had a lot of kids, but the promise was only given to one. The promise of the kingdom was only given to one child. That's Isaac, and then Jacob. Jacob had a brother Esau, which is Edom, the Caucasian race. But the promise went to Jacob. And those of you white Christian pastors out there, if you come across this video and you say Jacob's mother was duped or lied to, no. God came to his mother to make sure that Jacob was to get the promise, because Isaac had a favor for Jacob's brother Esau. But Esau was different. He worshiped a totally different God, the Canaanite gods. And the Most High knew what was going to happen with them 2 children. And that's why God went to, I think her name was Rebecca, to make sure to guide Jacob, because he wanted the promise to go to Jacob. Out of Jacob came the 12 tribes of Israel. And we as black people are part of the Israelites. We are from the tribe of Judah, or Yehuda, because there were no J's in those days. Just like Christ could have been named Jesus because there was no J's. It was Yeshua. So in those days, his name was Yehuda. But we were the Hebrews that came out of Judah. Today we're called Negroes, but you got a bunch of fake Jewish people that's lying and saying that it was them. And that's how they got their land over there in Israel. For the ungodly and his ungodliness are both alike hateful unto God. For that which is made shall be punished together with him that made it. Therefore, even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because in the creature of God they are become an abomination and stumbling blocks to the souls of men. See, it led men astray, especially the Israelite, because it was beaten into us to worship this devil. And a snare to the feet of the unwise. And if you try to tell people about this Caesar Borgia, especially Christians, that's just they're not going to give it up, they'll say you the brother from another planet. You know, they'll think you crazy when you trying to wake them up. And it's right here in the Apocrypha. For the devish of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication. See? Spiritual fornication. And the invention of them that the corruption of life. For neither were they from the beginning, neither shall they be forever. For by the vain glory of men, they entered into the world, and therefore shall they come shortly to an end. For a father afflicted with untimely mourning, when he hath made an image of his child. Right there. He hath made an image of his child, soon taken away, now honored him as a God, which was then a dead man, and delivered to those that were under him ceremonies and sacrifices. This is so you sacrifice on them holidays. You're doing it to this evil, false Edomite, Idumean. He is not the real Messiah, the son of the Most High, Ahiah, that brought us out of Egypt. You really have no idea what you're saying or who you following. I know it's a hard thing to change because a lot of us have been Christians for so long, but the Most High God is waking up a lot of us, not just the young, but the oldest too. To me, it's just not fast enough. But now they're coming up with this pandemic. That personally, that's what I think. But it's across the whole world that who Israel is, not just Judah, but all the 12 tribes of Israel are waking up all over the world. I wish you can see it. And they try to make us look bad sometimes by putting on some old fake Israelites, making them sound like the Black Panthers from the 1960s. A lot of those Israelites are not Israelites because we don't partake in violence. We partake in truth. All we have is this Bible. That's the only weapon we have, and that's what we use. So we don't get out there and curse. This is how you know a true Israelite. We don't get out there and curse nobody. We don't get out there put people down because we find out who we are. Now we tell the fake Jews that y'all are not the real true Jews because they're lying. They're living off a false identity, but they think we're so dumb we would never figure it out. But as far as these other camps that they show on the news, they got one. It's a new one out, all dressed in black, cursing like he never had a daddy, and taking up arms and guns, want to go against the Ku Klux Klan. We don't need to do all that. All we have is truth. And once you find out truth of your identity, you don't fear death. So we don't need to fight you for anything, but you're not going to hit us and get away with it. But a true Israelite is not going to take up arms like that or that vaccine. Thus, in process of time and commandments of kings were popes. You see, so this book, Triptych of Poisoners, goes into all the details of this family, what they did, and the untimely death. And it goes into Leonardo da Vinci, his booty buddy, basically what he is. Now I'm gonna go into this book, and this book is gonna take me a while. Then I'm gonna start the first chapter. So when you call and fix your lips on Jesus, you know who in the world you. There were no J's back then. This Jesus garbage was beaten into us. Okay, the first chapter is not important. Made the wife of one of his brothers his mistress, or murdered another brother. It is only relevant to say that he committed these acts, for it was such that made of him one of the most cruel, lascivious, and unnatural men who ever lived. When he looked at another people, it is as though he turned the telescope round to do so. He saw the people about him as midgets, less, no more than gnats or a moth, to be crushed to death or exterminated with insecticide. That was his thought of other people, other races at the time. Nobody was better, kind of like Hitler. Nobody was better than his race, and nobody was above him. That was Caesar Borgia's attitude, and it was his attitude toward his own father. He was the illegitimate son of Rodrigo Borgia. At the time of Cesare's birth, a cardinal later to become Pope Alexander VI. The Borgias came from Spain, and they were outstanding for their beauty, their virility, their ambition, and their striking mental ability. This goes into Rodrigo's birth, his place, and his family. I want to stick with Cesare. But his father wasn't much different. I mean, what near as bad as Cesare Borgia. But he did tricks and pulled tricks to become Pope Alexander VI. Family feeling ran high among the Borgias. They admired each other more than they admired any other people in the world. This family devotion took a sinister turn in a later generation of Borgias, when fathers, sons, and daughters were so enamored of each other that they were accused of incest. Cesare was suspected of being the father of one of Lucretia's children, and Lucretia, which is Cesare Borgia's sister, and Lucretia was called her father's daughter, wife, and daughter-in-law. Okay? It gets worse than this. Isabella Borgia, sister of Callictus III, had married a certain Joffrey, Lanzoa, a nobleman of Zativa. Callistus III is Rodrigo's brother. She was the mother of several children, of whom were boys Rodrigo, Pedro, and Luis. This is the father of Cedric Borgia. The Pope and he agreed to adopt them, take them under his care, and supervise their careers on condition that they abandon their father's name of Lanzo and adopted that of their mother and himself, Borgia. This is how Cedric Borgia became Borgia. Rodrigo made a deal to adopt these boys and had them to change their names. Okay. Rodrigo was the more handsome of the brothers. Manners were quite charming. He had many mistresses, and the most important of these was Vanosa Cantani. This is why he's climbing his way up to being Pope Alexander VI. Vanosa may have been a virtuous woman who looked upon the cardinal as her husband, for she seems to have been faithful to him. The cardinal later took it upon himself to arrange 2 marriages for her, and moreover seemed eager to preserve her good name. But there were three on whom he doted beyond all others. They were handsome Juan, dominating Cesare, and beautiful Lucretia, and all were the children of Venosa. This is Rodrigo's children. It is not certain whether the first child of this union was Juan or Cesare. Remember now, Cesare is the one you keep calling Jesus. According to Bellinose, Cesare was the elder. According to Gregorius, Gregorovius, Juan was. Rodrigo installed his favorite mistress in a house on the Piazza Pizzo, which was very close to the cardinal's palace, so that he could visit her frequently and without inconvenience. Now, Rodrigo is the one, he's a cardinal trying to be a Pope Alexander VI, but he already has a mistress that he kept on the side. Cedric's sister Lucretia was born on 18 April 1480. The 2 boys appear to have been somewhat abnormal. Or Lucretia, I think Lucretia was the 3rd youngest. The 3rd youngest. And there was another brother that came along also. The 2 boys appear to have been somewhat abnormally interested in their pretty little sister. Lucretia's pictures show her to be very attractive, although she was something less than a beauty, which is often attributed to her. But her long golden hair must have been startling to a people who were mostly dark, and her light eyes equally arresting. But surely her greatest charm must have been that air of helplessness, of childishness, due to the receding shine as much as to the light of wide eyes. This was just a little kid. She wasn't even a teenager yet. These youthful charm stayed with her until her death. Lucretia had the appearance of one who begged to be dominated. So in those early days of their precious, precocious childhood, in that unhealthy forcing house of passionate emotion, the two boys courted their sister, begging her favors, kissing her, embracing her, loving her as sex. Lucretia would have been superhuman if she could have refrained from taking advantage of this state of affairs. She did not wish to. She let them sue for her favors, always hoping that she would be able to accept Cesare, her brother, Cesare, as the winner. See, she had eyes for Cesare Borgia, the one you call Jesus. She evidently saw in Cesare the embodiment of all masculinity, all charm. Juan, too, she loved. Certainly, she loved him. He was handsome and a Borgia. But Cesare dominated the nursery and the house. He was the favorite of Venosa, that's his mother. He was the beloved of Lucretia, and he was determined to oust Juan from the place he held in the cardinal's affections and occupy it himself. They came to understand why their uncle visited their mother, and they began to realize that their uncle was indeed their father. That's Rodrigo's brother. Old in knowledge, they would gravely accept this state of affairs, which they played their games of love and passion within a family circle. Cesare was determined for the church. Therefore, Juan should go to Spain, there to take possession of his deceased brother's estate, and the bride he was to have married, as well as the title of Duke of Gandia. Cesare should remain in Italy, where he would study canon law, and Perugia and Pisa, in preparation for his dedication to the church. When he returned to Rome, he lived in the Borgia. He visited her frequently, and Lucretia felt the power of that spell which he had always cast over her. It is said that Cesare loved two people only, his mother Venosa and his sister Lucretia. It may have been that Cesare loved these two because they gave him that unquestioning devotion and submission which he sought from the rest of the world. This was scandalous enough, but there was another rumor in the streets of Rome. Cesare was often seen in the company of his sister. He was observed visiting her. They openly behaved like lovers, and there were spies to report that they spent nights together. It was said that Cesare Borgia was determined that his sister should be his mistress before she was the bride of any other. Now that's straight up incest. Cesare, without doubt, was the most important person in Lucretia's life at this time, as he probably was until his death. Cesare set the pace, and Lucretia followed. On a hot June day, Lucretia, wearing a gold embroidered dress, which cost 15,000 ducats. Her golden hair caught in a jeweled net, was married to Giovanni Sforza. Juan, now remember now, she's just a little kid. Juan had come home from Spain, and it was he who led his sister to the Pope's apartments where the ceremony was to take place. Sergio was present, his resentment suppressed. In his episcopal garments, he would have made a striking contrast to Juan. Dazzling with his jewels, he would have resented not only his brother, but the bridegroom who was to marry his sister. Lucretia looked essentially virginal. Her somewhat blank expression was that of a wide-eyed child, and it was small wonder that when it was declared she was too young for the consummation of the marriage. This was agreed to be so. This girl wasn't even 12 years old. Consummation is the sexual part of a marriage. They married her off, but they're saying she's not old enough to have sex because they didn't want her to have sex with this husband, but the two brothers was doing it. And the father was also. Juan looked very handsome in his jewel garments, and Lucretia, ever ready to be enamored of the members of her own family, may have wondered whether she was now going to play once more that game of creating jealousy and passion which she had enjoyed with her brothers when she was a small girl. At the supper party, which followed in the Pope's apartment, Sergio was not present. And as he was the only member of the family and absent himself, it is very likely that he did so in his jealous rage at seeing his sisters married to another man. Wow. This was just a little girl. People without power behind them could disappear suddenly. This is the power of the Borgia family. And no questions will be asked. Cesare had his hand of assassins, and any who defied himself must either escape from his venom, or it might be that one day they would be set upon by ruffians in the street, bullies, stabbed and left to die. Some might be tied in sacks and thrown into the Tiber River. There was another method of disposing of enemies, and this was by poison. Sergio found this a more satisfying method than any other. It could be easily administered at his table. He himself could watch it being done. He could lift his goblet, drink with the man, and know that before the night was over that man would be dead. The sense of power such action brought to him was an intoxication. Many secret poisons were known to him, for they had been brought to Spain by the Moors. The Moors were Israelites. These secrets had been preserved for centuries and were known only to his family. Sergio craved power over his fellow men and women, power over life and death. The Moors were black people. They were not white. And now check this out. The Pope was hilariously gay. Gay at that time means happy. Hilariously happy on this occasion. It seemed to him a great joke that this experienced young woman of 16 should be the bride of his 11-year-old Joffrey. Now that's the youngest of the two brothers, who was enchantingly pretty, but as a girl is pretty. Pay attention to that name, Joffrey, because you got Rodrigo, his brother, and then Joffrey was another brother. Juan, Rodrigo, Juan, and Joffrey. Juan, and Cesare were continually bringing charming people whom they had discovered to minister to their father's pleasure. They shared these visitors if they were girls. The Pope, unlike his sons, had never been attracted by beautiful young men. He craved self-aggrandizement. He wanted all the world to see him as he saw himself, as a man of the church, but as a great conqueror, the most powerful man in Rome. This is Cesare Borgia. The ancient law did not allow a bastard to become a cardinal, because the other members of the church were saying that Cesare, who you call Jesus, was a child. So they didn't want him to become a cardinal, but eventually he got in there through poison and killing, marrying into certain families. But Alexander was not going to allow such a law, however ancient, to stand in the way of what he wanted. So he set about legitimizing his son Venosa and a bishop. But Venosa, so it was said, was a married woman at the time. And a child of a married woman was, in law, the child of her husband, regardless of who laid with her. Venosa's husband, according to Infratura, had been Domenico Agrignano, a man who was employed by the church. Therefore, Cesare was not, in law, illegitimate and could be elected to the sacred college. You see how they play with words, but because this man was worked for the church, how they try to sneak around it being a law that this is a bastard child. They do the same thing today. When the cop kill a young black kid, how they take the brother in New York that they choked to death of the cigarette, and the autopsy, the doctor lied and said he died from overweight when everybody could see him being choked by the cop on the street. They do the same mess today. This is Esau. The Pope had allowed Cesare to adopt the name of Borgia because he was benevolent, interested in the family, and was determined to help the sons of their careers. At the same time, Alexander could not bear to disown any of his beloved children. After all, he was very proud of them, so he signed another bull, which he kept secret, declaring that he was indeed the father of Cesare Borgia. Many historians referring to these bulls bring forward the information therein as proof that Cesare was the elder of the two brothers. Alexander implies in these bulls that after the death of Domenico, that was the one that worked at the church, another son was born to Venosa, and this son was Juan. Therefore, it would seem that Cesare was the elder since he was supposed to have been born during the lifetime of Diaguino. This may be so, but on the other hand, as this matter was raised purely that Cedra might be proved legitimate and so be allowed to become a cardinal. The information may arouse suspicion in some minds, and the birth dates of brothers remain uncertain. 13. Cedra was moving towards the climax of jealousy and frustration. Now that one was away, his jealousy of his sister's husband was growing to a madness. Remember, now the sister had gotten married. She's still just a little kid. Giovanni Sforza was becoming very uneasy as Canio Sforza. Now that's who Lucretia married. He knew that the Pope looked with disfavor on his family, and he knew also that Cedra hated him. He must continually watch what he ate and drank. None knew the components of that subtle draw, which the Borgias were apart to slip into the wine of those they considered to be their enemies. All were sure that it could provide death in some form or another. Some men, after partaking of it, appeared to go into a drunken sleep from which they did not awake. Others went merrily away to be seized by violent agony during the night and died before the dawn broke. Some contracted a lingering illness which did not affect them until weeks later. They went into declines, their hair fell out, their nails dropped off, and their teeth broke as though they had suddenly become as brittle as glass. And all were sure that these deaths were brought about by the mysterious concoctions of the Borgias. If one were threatened, thought Giovanni, there was only one thing a wise man could do: slip away out of their reach. This was what he did. One night he went out as though to visit a friend and did not return. Lucretia was indifferent to the loss of her husband. She had tolerated him in her palace, but she had cared nothing for him. Her brothers had made sure of that. This is a sick family, man. This is when you say, "Oh Jesus, oh Jesus." Yeah, this is who you talking about. Cedra was delighted to be with his sister, as she was to see him. The year she had spent in Pesaro would then have seemed a wasted year, although it was characteristic of Lucretia that she should not be aware of this at the time. Lucretia, at this phase of her life, seemed colorless. The colorless means like a dog color, clueless, in other words. But this is colorless. COLOURLESS. Wishing only to be dominated. Cedra and her father were very willing to do the dominating. I'm gonna read that again. Cedra and her father, which is Rodrigo, Cedra is the one you keep calling Jesus, were very willing to be the dominating. She just wishing for them to just take over her body and do whatever they wanted to do with it. This is still just a little young kid. At this time, she may have been 13, maybe 12, 13, something like that, 14. During the trouble with the French, disturbing stories had reached Alexander of his daughter-in-law, Sanchia. Cedra, as eagerly awaited the arrival of Sanchia, Lucretia was a little apprehensive. If Sanchia was as beautiful irresistible, as beautiful and as irresistible as she was made out to be, Lucretia feared that Cedra might be interested in the newcomer. Sanchia was dark-haired and dark-skinned, but her eyes were startlingly blue, and her lashes and brows were as black as her hair. Her mouth was full of sensuous, and in contrast with Lucretia's look of girlish innocence, Sanchia had a look of witchery and deep knowledge. The people of Rome, watching this 19-year-old girl, prophesied that she would bring trouble to the Vatican. They were right. Sanchia immediately set out charming those two whom she sensed to be the most important people in the Vatican, the Pope and Cedra. The Pope was soon under her spell. Now, this girl, 19 years old, and permitted her to flout Vatican etiquette so persistently that this was soon the cause of scandal among the cardinals. As for Cedra, he immediately began plans for the seduction of his brother's wife, seducing his brother's wife. Sanchia had heard of Cedra's reputation and was fascinated by that most dangerous man in Rome. He realized that the need to accept him as a lover. For to have repulsed Cedra might have meant to endanger her life. She was too careless and impulsive to watch what she ate and drank. Therefore, she told herself that submission to Cedra would be not only a pleasure, but a necessity. This prince of vice must certainly have whetted her appetite. It would be amusing to discover who was the more knowledgeable in pleasures of the senses. Geoffrey, that's the other brother, the third brother, only too glad to have the attentions of his insatiable wife turned from himself, welcomed Cedra to their apartments, and very soon Lucretia joined them also. This lady, Sanchia, married Geoffrey, one of the brothers, Juan, Cedra, and Geoffrey. Lucretia joined in. All this is incest. Remember in the beginning, when I first started out reading, it talked about going after his brother's wife. I'll go back to it. It is not important to state the exact age in which Cedra became his sister's lover and made the wife of one of his brothers his mistress. That was Geoffrey. Juan was very handsome, and Sanchia could never resist him. Sanchia could never resist any man who attracted her. So it was not long before it was said in Rome that Sanchia of Ragon warmed the beds of the Pope's 3 sons. The Pope's 3 sons. All 3 of them is right there. Right there. 3 sons. This is a sick family, but this is who you praying to. It was now realized in the Vatican that the more scandalous method of releasing Lucretia must be employed. Divorce. It was therefore announced that the marriage between Lucretia and Sforza had never been consummated, I mean they never had sex, and that Lucretia was still Virgio Intactica, saying that she's still a virgin, but she couldn't have been because she'd been having sex with her brothers for the longest. This the Pope considered a good reason for divorce. Venosa had decided to give a supper party. My brother, what's going on with you?
I just got the message, but we've been out and about all day. I just got back to the house.
Well, that's okay. I'm in the middle of the video, and the topic is about. By the way, people, this is the call-in. This is Mark. Give your name, Mark. Is your Hebrew name?
Shir Yeshua.
Shir Yashub Judah.
Shir Yeshua. Mm-hmm.
And
Shir Yeshua Judah.
The topic is over this fake false Christ, and I'm into the book Triptych Poisoners, and I went in some scriptures. I went into the Apocrypha where it says a man at an untimely death would put his son up to be worshipped as a god. And if you got any insights on this fake false Christ that they call in Jesus, or any scripture that you can I can go to right quick to add on to this video, be glad to bring it out.
Okay. Well, I don't know exactly what you've covered already. So as far as Bible text, I probably wouldn't want to go into that because I don't know what it is that you have covered. But as far as with that one there in Wisdom of Solomon, where you at in very great detail history on this Jesus character. I'm actually doing the lesson right now that's called Jesus is an idol. And it is an idol that we really have to get away from worshiping, because idolatry worshiping is one of the things that, that upsets the Most High the most when it comes to us as the children of Israel.
Absolutely. Idolatry. That's right.
Yeah, but right there where you at, what is that? Wisdom of Solomon. What chapter is that? You don't mind.
That was
Is that like 13? Where you at?
That was.
Let me see here. We're talking about the untimely death. Is that Wisdom of Solomon? That's Wisdom of Solomon, right? Or is it,
yeah, that's Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, starting from 8. Right. Starting from 8 on down.
Wisdom of Solomon 14.
Yeah, you go.
That's it. So you see there in verse 11 to 13, right? We can back up to 8. It says, but that which is made with hands is cursed as well as he that made it. And he, because he made it, and because being corruptible, it was called God, right?
Right.
So that's coming along with the Jesus character and with the image of that cross,
Right.
Because when the Christians,
Right. I forgot about that one.
Right. That's dealing with, with the whole symbolism of Christianity. The cross is dealing with Jesus. It's dealing with, the doctrine of it as well, because, you got pastors, right? What do they put? They'll get a gold tooth and they'll have a cross in the middle of that gold tooth, to symbolize that they're Christians. We have crosses, in our cars or on our mirror. You know what I'm saying? This is one of the ways that Christians identify themselves as being Christians, with the cross. And one thing that they have done with the Jesus character is that they made him a God. When you go through the scriptures, Yeshua, whom the world called Jesus, he never asked to be a God. He never treated himself as a God. He was a man like you and I. That's why he prayed to the Father 3 times a day. You get that in scripture. That's why, when he was going through his hardship, he prayed to the Father that if it was his will, which is the Father's will, to let this cup pass for him, because he was not a God himself, right? He was a man. But they have made him a God and they worship him. You hear Christians say that Jesus and God is both the same person.
Right.
You did. And they worship him instead of worshiping the Father. But it goes on here. If you don't mind me continuing to read.
Yeah, go ahead.
In verse 10, it says, "But that which is made shall be punished together with him that made it. Therefore, even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation. Because in the creature of the Most High, they are become an abomination and a stumbling block to the souls of men and a snare to the feet of the unwise." Jesus is a stumbling to many souls. And it's so much of a stumbling block that you can give a lesson like what you're giving in your video right now. You can sit down across from a man and you can talk to him and you can show him these things. It's clear as the sky is blue, but he'll walk away from the conversation. He'll tell you something like, "Well, Jesus is all I know, and I'm going to worship Jesus," whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is the delusions that Ahaya has allowed to come into the world that we have to get from up under if we want to know what the truth really is. These are stumbling blocks and these are slave chains that we are attached to, that if we don't get away from them, there's no way we're going to be able to enter into the kingdom of the Most High. Jesus himself is an idol. He was created by the Roman Catholic Church. This is what you're bringing out. Cesare Borgia, or Gero Borgia, which was the Borgia family, and he was the Pope at that particular time. He died early, and he made an image of him, and he had Michelangelo to make paintings of him, and he sent them out to the kings, and he had people to worship him. And this has been a tradition since that time throughout all the world. And we have never forgotten it, and we still worship him. As Black people, we have had that white, pale-faced, long-haired, blue-eyed guy hanging up somewhere in our house.
Yeah.
As kids, Jesus, right?
That's
Who
right.
is he? The Bible don't describe him like that, but yet we still worship him. And I'm going to finish out in these verses here. In verse 12, so it says, "For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them the corruption of life. For neither were they from the beginning, neither shall they be forever." So at some point, whether people want to believe us or not, that Jesus Christ is an idol, at some point, they're all going to be, the truth is going to be revealed to them. Because them that created Jesus and Jesus, the idol, are going to be destroyed and taken away from this earth, man. They're going to be destroyed and taken away from this earth.
Absolutely.
And so Matthew 1:21, I believe it is, tells us what his name should be, which is Yeshua HaMashiach, because in Matthew 1:21, it says, the reading of it says you should call him Jesus, right? That's how it's written in the Bible. You should call him Jesus, for he should be a savior of his people. Well, it's telling you whatever his name should be, it should mean savior. That's Yahshua. My savior, Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
That's what his name should be. And people got to recognize, and I'm sure they done heard it a million times, that the letter J is the youngest letter in the alphabet. Understand that there's no way, even by that note, that his name could be Jesus.
Hey, brother.
So there was no such thing as the letter J.
Hold that thought. I'm gonna go back on that Matthew 1:20 and 21. Matthew 1:21. Hold that thought. Okay, I'm gonna go to that chapter, Matthew Matthew.
Matthew chapter 1 and 21.
Okay. Here's Matthew 1, chapter 1. Okay. Matthew 1 and 21. Okay. Okay, now, folks, I want you to listen to this. Matthew 1:21 reads as he says, "And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus." Now that's what's in your Bible. For he shall save his people from their sins. Now, people, look, I want to show you something, people. Look at this book here. Okay, look at this book. I want you to get a chance to get this book. Okay, this book is going to show you how they put in Jesus and took out the correct name in Matthew 1:21. I'm gonna read it from this book. It's called Yeshaya Ahaya Scriptures, and it gives the correct names that was there in the beginning before the popes before they started changing words in the Bible. I'm gonna go to that same scripture. It says, "And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yasha." Jesus is not in this book. "For he shall save his people from their sins." I'm gonna show you in this book. I hope you guys can see it. Jesus is not in the original text. It's right. I don't know if you can see it. See if I can point to it real good. 21. 21 right up under there. It's gonna be hard. Right up under there. I don't know if you can see it, but if you get this book, this will show you how the Jesuits changed certain names. Because if it's saying Jesus, what's the point of me making this video? If your Bible is still using this word Jesus, you're going to think that it's something wrong with me, and we're the one that's incorrect. But there are books out there like this one that will show you the correction that the Jesuits made, because in this Holy Book 1611 edition that I showed in the beginning of the Bible, that's not in there. It's the original name, Yeshua. Okay, brother, go ahead, man. I just wanted to bring that out.
Oh, no. You did good. And it's good that you brought that out, especially in the Yeshaya Ahaya Bible, because I believe it's somewhere in the back of that as well, where it gives you, the history on that as well, and how the Masoretes also removed the name of the Father as well over 7,000 times out of the Bible.
Wow.
Sure, that would be another video, to cover, but these are things that they did in order for us to worship their idols that they have. All right. Satan don't care how we worship him, as long as we worship him. And so you got to ask yourself, okay, well, if Jesus, and this is something that you can go Google yourself. I'm one of those type of people who ever come across this video, don't take my word for it. You go do the research on it for yourself, right? But if you got to ask yourself the question, then, if Jesus is not the name of Messiah, well, what does Jesus mean? Well, it's in Latin, it's earth pig. That's what it is. It's earth pig.
Earth kids?
Okay. And so, say that again.
You saying earth kids?
Earth pig.
Earth pigs.
Earth pig. That's what it is, right? And so they have you worshiping an earth pig, a swine, right? But people, we are in the last days, and according to the book of Daniel, it tells you that knowledge shall increase, right? The seals are open. The things that were secret are no longer secret. Truth is being revealed. Now, there is no reason anyone, whether you know that you're a Hebrew or not, even if you're still in the Christian church, there is no reason that anyone should be calling on the name Jesus in today's time. It is too much information out there for people to know that Jesus is not the correct name to be calling him, man. Jesus is synonymous with Jupiter. Jesus is synonymous with Zeus.
Yeah,
Jesus is synonymous with the Greek god, has nothing to do with the son of Ahiah, which came to save Israel from their sin.
right.
Jesus has nothing to do with us. So I don't have a problem talking about Jesus at all.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I want to point out here in Wisdom of Solomon before I have to leave you.
Okay.
Because I do. I was calling you to holler at you. I'm glad I called at the time. I didn't realize you was in the video, but all praises to Ahiah. Everything worked according to his will, right?
It's
Let's
absolutely.
go back over there to Wisdom of Solomon.
Okay.
Chapter 14.
Okay.
And read 19 through 21.
Chapter 15, 19, 21.
19 through 22. Let's read 19 through 22.
Chapter 15.
14. Chapter 14. That's what we're in.
14.
15. What chapter were we in? Yeah, chapter 14, verse 19 through 22. Let's get that.
Okay. Wisdom of Solomon in the Apocrypha, chapter 14, verse 19. For he peradventure, willing to please one in authority, forced all his skill.
Hold on, Aki. I'm sorry. Let's go back up to 16. We can't leave out 16. Let's start at verse 16.
16?
Uh-huh.
Okay, Wisdom of Solomon 14 and 16. Thus, in process of time, a ungodly custom grown strong was kept as a law, and and graven images were worshipped by the commandments of kings.
So verse 16 said, in a process of time, an ungodly custom grown strong. How strong is Christianity today?
Yeah.
Huh? How strong is calling on the name Jesus today? See? These are customs over a process of time that have grown strong.
Yeah.
Remember, he said that these things were not from the beginning. And that's the problem with lies, is that you can have a lie so long in the world that lie become a truth to the people. But the thing about a lie, even though it has become a truth to the people, it itself is never the truth. You see?
Right. And what
people are holding on to a custom that has grown strong, so strong to the point that they can't even see through the murkiness to accept the truth that Jesus.
I was explaining earlier how that would take place, that the Catholic Church went around the world. I was telling them about the South Pacific, how Israel was driven by, gave this false, that's how it
exactly. Because when you look at the Northern Kingdom, and even us as Judah, right? We're Christians, but the majority of the Northern Kingdom, they're Catholic. Now, people would argue you, but again, go check it for yourself. Believe me, okay? I'm not giving you information that you can't go find out for yourself. And it's like the brother said, that these customs grew strong during the French, you had the Portuguese, which were of what? Catholic.
That's right.
Mexicans, Catholic. Cubans, Catholic.
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans, Catholic. You see?
Yeah.
They didn't just become Catholics on their own. It's because their slave masters put that religion on them, the same that they put the religion of Christianity on us here in the North America.
Coming out of Africa.
There's no such thing as Christians, man. The Bible don't even have anything to do with Christians.
That's right. They didn't even use the word Christ. What did the word Christ actually come from?
The word Christ, that's a Greek word within itself. That's a word that I and there's a lot of Hebrews that use it, and I don't knock them, right?
Right.
But I don't use Christ. Sacred Christos.
Christos
is the guy whom the name actually comes from, and you can get that information from the back of your Ahiah Yeshaya Bible. I know that information is back there. Sacred name. These are the ones that was called Christians that follow this guy.
Right.
And you see this name on hospitals. On hospitals. This is a name that still reigns in the earth today. Christus. 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 That is Christus. Go look it up again. I'm not giving you information that you cannot find. That's his name.
Yeah.
So these are the people that you are worshiping. You're worshiping idols.
Yeah.
So those who have ears, let them hear. If you want to come out of the bondage, get away from Jesus.
Yeah.
Get away from God.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there are a lot of camps that want to put down the character of Cesare Borgia and give you the truth of him, but yet they'll uphold his name, Jesus. We, as the three Hebrew boys, we get rid of all of it. We tear the whole character down, the person, the history, the name, because the disciples never used this name Christ. They always called him the Messiah. See, so we come straight out of, but we're not upholding nothing that has to do.
None of my forefathers was ever looking for Christ. They were looking for a Messiah. That's what they was looking for. They was not looking for no Christ. That's a Greek word.
Okay? Right. That's
but
right.
Let's continue reading here, man. We were in 17.
Whom men could not honor in presence because they dwelt far off. They looked, they took the counterfeit of his visage. Visage is face, what that means. Visage from far and made
the counterfeit of his visage.
Oh, this counterfeit of his visage from far. And made a express image of a king whom they honored, to the end that this their forwardness they might flatter him that was absent as if he were present. That's this right here.
So, right. So these painters, what they did was they put in. How do you pronounce it? I pronounce it Cesare Borgia, but what is it? Cesare
Yes.
Borgia. Of painting this guy, and they took it and they spread it throughout the land. They spread it throughout the land, and then they made a law that is the image that you must worship. You got a popular black TV show that came on in the 70s called Good Times, and they had an episode that's called Black Jesus. So that was Cesare Borgia that was on the wall, the pale-faced Jesus, that Florida say that that's the only Jesus that she's ever known, and it's going to stay. But Michael went to the scripts to show that, and I'm using the word Jesus because this is the word that people are familiar with. He went to the word to show that the Bible described Jesus as a brother.
That's right.
Cold. Yeah. His hair is like sheep wool.
Yeah.
So why are we worshiping this white man? Where did this white man come from? Wisdom of Solomon is telling you. This is the beginning of spiritual fornication right here.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. Keep going up, verse 18.
18. Let me add to that. The painter that was told to draw a painting of him, one of the artists, which is Leonardo da Vinci, and the other, what's the other artist? Leonardo da Vinci. You called his name earlier. Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci were to draw paintings of this guy when he was sick. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was a gay friend of Cesare Borgia. They were lovers. And that's why when he painted Cesare Borgia, that's why he looked so feminine with the hair tilted. Long dress, long hair. He made him look how Leonardo da Vinci saw him in his mind as a lover. Okay, now 18. Okay. Also, the singular intelligence of the artificer did help to set forward the ignorant, no more superstition.
Yeah, to more superstition. Also, the singular diligence of the artificer did help to set forward the ignorant to more superstition. This thing became a strong custom. Remember? It wasn't so before, right? It had its origin. We're reading the origin of Jesus. And so the artificer is the artist. The two who helped push this thing, who gave it life, actually. Because it did not have life before, because it did not exist until after this dude died an untimely death, and his daddy mourned him. And so the artist created a god and made all the earth worship. Whole religion they built around this dude. Mm-hmm. And not a whole who had a father who was a whoremonger and had several children outside of his wedding.
That's right.
Marriage.
That's right.
This is how foul this Jesus guy is, and you want to continue to hold on to it?
Yeah.
No, let it go. Now let me make this clear. The words of the Bible, there's nothing wrong with that. It's your name. They changed the name.
Uh-huh.
So we can't do this that you're calling on. That's the point of this video. Am I correct, Doc?
That's right. No. We're going to 20, is it? 20 or 19?
We're gonna go to 21.
21.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an occasion to deceive the world, for men serving idols.
No, you was. I'm sorry, you were in verse 19.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to read to verse 21. We're going to stop at 21, but you stopped at verse 19.
Okay.
Read verse 19.
For he, per adventure, willing to please one authority, force all his skill to make a resemblance of the best fashion, and so the multitude, allured by the grace of the work,
is idol worship. Again, Jesus is no more than Tammuz,
right,
who is both Nimrod and Semiramis.
Right.
All of this stuff goes back to ancient Babylon. But when you learn who Yeshua HaMashiach is, that's when you learn the truth. That Joseph is his dad, which is according to scripture. That he was tempted at all points, but did not sin, just like we are tempted. But yet we do fall, but because he was tempted, we can pray to him, and he'll take our prayers to the Father. All praises to Wahai for that.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's right.
This dude, Jesus, man, he bad business, man. He's bad business. Let's go ahead and finish this chapter 21, brother.
Okay. And so the multitude, allured by the grace of the work. That's a name that could not be heard.
Thousands and millions of people praying in the name of Jesus, and their prayers not going no higher. Incommunicable name.
I need to write that down.
It's not going anywhere. But once you are free from the realms of Christianity and from knowing their history and their truth, that they deceive the whole world. So that's your right. You ain't got to take my word for it. In fact, I don't want you to take my word for it. So now it's up to you.
I'm gonna give you a call back once I wrap this up.
Okay then. Shalom.
Okay, shalom, brother. Keep saying connection lost. But anyway, I want to continue this book, The Script Type to Poison. And it was June and hot, therefore she did not give the party in her Roman residence, but in her vineyard, which was between the churches of San Martino, the two sons. I'm going to read that again. There were other guests besides Venosa's two sons, but it was an intimate party. Cesar had discarded his cardinal's robes, and Spinoza must have been Juan, a great soldier and a Spanish duke, regarding these sons of hers, Cesar and greatness. That was a sign of his greatness. Then Cesar, her Juan, but Cesar was the greatest man in Italy. And she would be ready to swear in the whole world. It was said that no beautiful young women or young men were safe. Once Juan had cast his eye, they must go or suffer a consequences of insulting the Borgia dignity. To seemed exactly as it should be. The two most powerful men under his holiness. When they took leave of their mother and stepfather and the few guests who had made up the company, a masked figure appeared in the vineyard and asked softly for the Duke of Gandia. Juan greeted. It was his newest love unknown, for Juan had been seen in the streets of Rome in the last weeks accompanied by a masked person whom he seemed devoted. This is a masked man. It's not a female with no mask on. This was a man with his masked friend. This was evidently so, for when he reached, he did not return in an hour to go home. This was the last time Juan was seen alive. He was found in the deserted Piazza d'Agli, stabbed to death. The groom is a male. Dalmatian moored on the banks of the Tiber River. He has on horseback, had given instructions as to address a river, and he dead. The body had been thrown into the river, and the dead man's cloak floated, bearing him up for a while. Then he who had been addressed as my lord ordered that stones be thrown at the cloak. This was done, and soon the cloak and body were seen no more. So if you get somebody of a high position, and the only people at that time of that kind of high position had to be the Pope himself or Cesar Borgia, which was when asked why he did not immediately report what he had seen, the boat were ducats in his purse. Ducats is money, Roman money, and no attempt had been made to wrench the jury. Rumor was many were suspected, chiefly